Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Reroute Reflections, the podcast where we sit down with leaders and experts who deal with change every single day. Today, I am joined by Anna Moritz-Kelm. Anna has spent the last decade plus working in organizational change management, both in corporate consulting and in-house OCM roles. She started her career in Sydney, Australia, which is crazy cool, and has supported major transformations across org design, technology implementation, and behavioral change. She also holds a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology. What makes Anna's story particularly interesting, and I think a lot of us can relate, I know I sure can, is that while she was helping organizations navigate change, she began to notice a disconnect with herself and the role that ultimately led her to start a new chapter. She's now pursuing a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling to focus on helping individuals navigate change at a much more personal level. Anna, welcome to Reroute Reflections. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Andrew. It's an honor to be here, and I haven't seen you in a while. We used to work together, and yeah, thanks for the invitation. I'm very excited to talk and kind of take a different spin on one of your episodes. I've listened to a few previous ones, and sounds like kind of a completely different take. So I'm excited.
Oh my God, I'm excited. I mean, I thought it was only my mother that listened to these podcasts, so I'm really great to know that we bumped up to a second listener. This is great.
Well, I want to say hi to your mom, and you can say hi to mine too,
Oh,
because she'll listen later. So
hey, Anna's mom. Welcome to
Andrew's
Reroute
mom.
Reflections. Please subscribe. He's really trying to make this a thing. No, it's so great that we're getting a chance to connect, again and talk. We've been talking about doing podcasts. I feel like, I just love to talk, and that's partly why I've started a podcast because, why not? It's,
Absolutely,
it's been on my
absolutely.
bucket list for a long time. And it's funny because I think we talked about doing this podcast for a while, and then it was like, kind of like, what was it? Just like, no, we didn't talk for a while about it. And then I just listened to a podcast with Mel Robbins and Barbara, who I always forget her
She's
last
on
name.
Shark Tank.
She's on Shark Tank,
Yeah, I know exactly who
which,
you're talking about because I listened to that as
and I,
well. Yeah.
you did, eh? And
Yeah.
I loved, I loved her on Shark Tank. I just like love her like energy and stuff. But I think I fell more in love with her during that podcast, which I'll link in the description if anyone is interested in it. But I just loved her story. But it was funny because I was listening to that podcast, and they said they were talking about one stat, just like had almost nothing to do with the podcast topic at all, which was more about Barbara's story. But the one stat that like really stuck out to me that they talked about, and immediately I started thinking about us to how I like have a conversation about, was this stat around 69% of people in America say that they would quit their job if they could afford to. And I was like, 69%? That seems like a lot of people.
I had the
It's wild.
I had the opposite reaction. I was like 69%. Isn't that higher? Isn't it higher than that? Or isn't it
Yes.
I guess I wasn't surprised by that metric. Now,
Mhm.
kind of when I think about that metric, I think it resonates because the majority of my career, really all of my career, has been in theory traditional corporate America type of roles. Now, I have friends that are in various industries, right? And I would say maybe role satisfaction might be different. It's just a different type of work, different cultures of work. But thinking about that stat through a corporate perspective, I thought that this sounds pretty spot on to me, just based on the conversations I've had with people that I've worked with throughout the years.
Yeah, it's interesting because both of us, kind of had that moment, of maybe the fit isn't right. And for me, went the consulting independent route, which, I'm doing right now. But so I'm not really surprised actually now that you say it, because I have heard this a lot around, I'm just not happy with my job. And I feel like a lot of the memes that are out there on TikTok or Instagram, they're all about how much, I hate my job right now. And it got me thinking about, there's all these different pieces, I think, around like what people could hate about their job,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, it's
like,
very multifaceted. It's not just one
yeah,
perspective. Absolutely. There's tons of
right.
variables and everybody's situation is very different, right?
Right. Cause there's like, I hate what I do. like I hate the job itself, right? And then there's the like I hate my boss or I hate
Mhm,
my company
mhm.
or you know, yeah, just like the culture just isn't a right fit. Or I think like maybe I used to like my job, but now I just outgrew it or something like that, you know? And so where do you think like it fits? I mean, maybe it is just like it depends, but like uh, is it more about like the work itself or do we think it's like those conditions of the work that seems to
Yeah.
be what's getting people?
Yeah, I was thinking about this before we joined this call today. I think it's one very standard consulting answer, right? Like it depends, but um I do think that a lot of it doesn't necessarily have to do directly with your daily tasks or the work that you are doing. I think it's more so the expectations that are placed on us. And, I know you're in Canada, I'm in America. From a corporate perspective, those are very similar working environments, right? I think people from America maybe have the stereotype that Canadians are more laid back or don't have as stringent work hours, but I previously came from a company that had a huge office in Canada and they worked just as much as we did. But from my perspective and the different, internal consulting roles and traditional consulting roles that I've held, is you're held to very high expectations. If you are working for a publicly traded company, um, your company's main goal is to grow, right? And make money for shareholders. And that then translates to a lot of the time folks working longer hours and working harder for not no additional compensation, right? And I think, when you're an entry level employee, that feels very manageable because your responsibilities are not as broad, right? And
Mhm.
as you kind of move up the corporate ladder, your responsibilities expand. You may move into people management versus just kind of your daily tasks. Um, and that balance can be very difficult, along with whatever stuff people are dealing with in their personal lives. And, so I think that's why that stat didn't surprise me because, one, because of all the Instagram memes about, you know,
Yeah. It's just
people
like it's so
like
salient, right? It's
and
like
and
everywhere.
let's suffer together. And really, I mean, there is something to be said about when you are working in a very challenging environment, you can meet some of the best people to do that work with, right? And really bond over that experience. But different people have different capacities for that, right? And personally,
Mhm.
my capacity is, I could do it for 10 to 12 years. I got really tired. And I just thought to myself, I have this amazing skill set because I do believe that change management and OD work and sort of the HR space and human capital space is a great space to be in if you're in corporate. But
Mhm.
I think the corporate culture for me, it just didn't fit anymore. And it felt like I was personally, I always want to be that type of person that's like, oh, I work to live, I don't live to work, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that ratio really flipped around for me. And I just knew when I was thinking about it 24/7 that I needed to ask myself some really hard questions. So
Yeah, no, exactly. And I can't help but, think about the irony around like what you did, as work in change management, right? And then, the moment where, and I'd love to like talk about that moment of when that disconnect hits you, where
yeah.
you were like, almost like now I got to manage this change individually that like I'm managing change for large transformations. Um, how did that disconnect happen? Was it like, just realizing this corporate environment is just not for me and like I love change management but I want to do it on a more personal level? Like how did it go from, the moment of, I don't feel like the fit is there to then realizing that you wanted to pivot into now, mental health or clinical, what am I trying to say?
You got it.
Um
Clinical mental health.
yeah,
You got it.
clinical
Psychotherapy,
mental health is just
all the buzzwords. You're
psycho.
good. Yeah. I mean,
I did do an undergrad in psychology, which makes it even more embarrassing.
you're good. You're good. I before answering that, I'll start off by just saying like when it comes to personal life changes, personal behavior changes, it's usually a choice between what hurts and what hurts worse, right? Because changing any type of behavior in your life is inherently very difficult. I mean, there's neuroscience to prove that we are rewiring our brains to learn something new. It's inherently really sticky and uncomfortable. That's why change
Hmm.
management at a holistic corporate and organizational level is really hard. It is a really hard thing to be able to do well. And so now taking that down to the micro level and answering your question, um, my choice between what hurts and what hurts worse was staying in this role and in this field that I am sort of exhausted. You know, I've gotten to a certain level, and the next step would be kind of going into leadership and further expanding responsibilities. That felt impossible to me with how I was managing my life. I'm like, I physically, mentally, emotionally don't think I can do that. So that state is what hurt worse for me than stepping back and saying to myself, let me, thoughtfully blow up my life and do something different. But I will. And the other thing I'll say to answer that question is I remember sitting down when we were all like, this was years ago, my first job, right out of graduate school, sitting down at the desk kind of at the end of my first week. And I thought to myself, is this what I've signed up for until I retire? I mean, and I it really made me think about, as I was kind of thinking about this conversation, when I was younger in high school and in college and thinking about my career, I really thought about it from, what interests me and what is going to make me enough money to live the life I want to live. I did not think about the lens of what are my values and what is the lifestyle I want to live. And I think if I had been educated in that way, I may have taken this path. I may have taken a completely different path. But those are two perspectives I really didn't think about. And, a decade worth of experience really made me sit back and think, do I want to do this for the next 25 years? Or do I want my life to look different? And the answer was I wanted my life to look different. But I think there were moments across my
Hmm.
career journey. One was when I was in consulting and I was flying in, flying out every single week. I mean, that was pre COVID for a number of years, and that was really hard. Can you have a dog? No, you can't have a dog. Now I got three dogs, right? But I mean, it's literally,
You made up for it.
yeah, it's exactly. I overcompensated. And there were moments along the way where I had fabulous managers, fabulous mentors who are like, you're so good at this, we want to give you these opportunities. And that feeling I had inside of me
Mhm.
was maybe surface level excitement, but more fear, right? In
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm getting myself in pretty far, and I ended up taking all those opportunities and learning a great deal from all of them. But I think when it comes down to it, we have one life, and
Mhm.
I decided that I wanted to do something different to use very transferable skills on an individual level. The last thing I'll say about that is I have struggled for years with somatic symptoms, like body symptoms, when I get really emotional and really stressed. So I'll get pain, I'll get really bad headaches, and that is an internal indicator for me that I am not my nerve. I feel unsafe. My nervous system is operating like up here, and that's
Mhm.
not ideal from like operating from that constant state of high alert and anxiety. And that my overall health played very much into this decision as well. And that's
Mhm.
not something that I share a lot with people. Um, it's hard to in a corporate space, where we're all pulling
Yeah.
ourselves up by the bootstraps 24/7. So,
Well, honestly, thank you so much for sharing that.
yeah,
Honestly, and I know
absolutely.
it resonates so much with, I'm sure, so many people, but myself included. Like your story sounds so similar in terms of those like checkpoints of
Yes.
like kind of stepping back and being like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Is this is it, right?
And I will share
And
something. Sorry to interrupt you. I gotta share this.
no, no,
It's funny. Am I allowed to say one swear word on this podcast?
you can say as many as you want. It's
Okay.
it's not meant for kids. I should have told you that at the beginning.
Well, so my dad has a friend. His name is Kevin that I've known for many years now. And I was talking to him once after I had started my career, and I said, I don't know. I don't know if I like this. I don't know if I'm happy in this. And he said, he asked me a question. He said, "Do you know why the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence?" And I said, "No." He said, "Because there's shit on the other side." And so that right there tells you that whatever decision you make, whether it's because we all just make the best decisions with the data that we have at the time, right? And so
Hmm.
I don't look back at 22, 24-year-old Anna and say, God, what a stupid decision. I say, well, I thought that's what I wanted, right? And
Hmm.
I think there's a certain level of self acceptance and kindness to yourself as you go through this and decide to, it's always okay to change your mind, right? But
Yeah.
also keeping in mind that there are going to be things about this new career path that I take that I am not going to like, right? And that's with
Hmm.
any job. And I think that's a very, I think, healthy way to look at it versus getting
Yes.
your hopes up. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think a lot of people can relate to this idea because I mean I myself went through it. Was like, and you talked about it, right? Once you're in your career, you know you're a top performer, right? As I was, and so everyone's like, oh my god, you're great. Like, let's give you this opportunity, let's give you that, and you don't really ever kind of stop to think, especially when you're younger, like, is this what I want to do? You're just like, yeah, sure, love it, great, let's keep going, and
Yeah.
you just almost get caught up into it.
Well,
And
and who doesn't want to be a top performer, right? Who doesn't
right.
want to be handed those activities? And if you're working 14 hours a day, and if your personal life is suffering, and if your health is suffering, that all feels very secondary
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
first start out. And I
Right.
think as you start acquiring things, right? Like a
Hmm.
family, a
Yeah.
tribe of dogs, right? You know, and you start to kind of develop and mature as a human, right? And as a person, and you
Hmm.
start to
Hmm.
figure out, well, work isn't the only thing in my life. Where else do I want to
Hmm.
spend my time? Like, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. We all don't
Yeah.
have the ability to use those same 24 hours the same way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we're very, we're all complex. We evolve constantly. And so the thought of, just because you enjoyed what you're doing even, a year ago, it's it's unrealistic to think that you're going to be in the same place that you were a year ago, even, let alone 5, 10 years from now. And so that's just, I think what we're talking about and getting to is this idea of just like the self-awareness piece and
Yeah.
trying to really just step back and ask yourself these questions. Like, you had the physical kind of like triggers almost to kind of let you know, like,
Absolutely.
oh, something's off, right? I myself were, it was anxiety attacks that made me realize, like, all right, I'm in this, something's off. Like, I've never had these before. And so, but without those triggers, even if you're just feeling like maybe your mood is off, or
Hmm.
you're just not showing up with your family, friends, partner, whomever, dogs, cats, mice, it's it's an opportunity for you to maybe step back and maybe start to ask yourself, like, and we're not really talking about, like, yes, people who are not happy with their job. I think whenever you hear people talk about it, they automatically start thinking like, well, I can't leave my job, I've got so and so, I got this commitment, that commitment, and that's not
Yeah.
really what we're talking about. It's more like, you do it doesn't if you don't like it, if you're in that 69%, you owe it to yourself to be honest with yourself and figure out what is happening. Like,
And
why are you feeling that way, right?
absolutely. And to ask yourself those difficult questions, because I think what's happened in corporate America is those feelings of stress and anxiety. I truly feel like they have been very normalized, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and I think in just one caveat as well, I'm in a position, not everybody's in a position to just be like, well, I don't want this career, like I'm going to lift and shift to something else, right? Like, I'm in a very privileged position where My
Hmm.
husband is working. I am on his insurance, right? Like we can afford to do that. We don't have a lot of external expenses. That option is not available for Joe Schmo who has four kids and
Hmm.
is saving up for college tuition for four different children, right? And so I think, but to your point, the ability to step back and ask yourself some questions is available to everybody, right? And it doesn't have to
Exactly.
be this complete reinvention and like I said, like a strategic sort of blowing up of your life. It could really be
Hmm.
like, hey, maybe right now I don't want a promotion. Maybe I'm
Hmm.
okay just doing what I'm doing and enjoying the work life balance that I have. That's okay. That was never sold
Hmm.
as an option to me, right? I don't think
Yeah.
it's sold as an option to a lot of people because organizations are looking for top talent. They're looking for talent that's going to be retained, that's going to produce um, more than other talent that they were to hire. And it's just not. I almost feel like you're judged if you don't want to keep moving
100% you're
upwards.
judged.
Absolutely.
100% you're judged. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Because like, yeah, could you imagine? I mean, if I ever said no to a promotion or it's like somebody saying like, hey, I think you'd be great for this, like we're gonna make this happen. If I said no to that, I couldn't even imagine like the repercussions of that. And so that would it's so hard to, but the amount of respect and I think that's all just in my head. Honestly,
Well,
I don't I don't think anyone would have seen that as like us a knock on me. It's just I think it's just the way we're raised, right? You know what I mean?
and
In corporate
conditioned, it
America.
may be also just a
Yeah.
condition of our generation as well,
Hmm.
being millennials. Yeah, I had a gal that reported to me a couple jobs ago, and she said no to a promotion. And at the time, I was like, God, you're really. And I didn't say this to her; it wasn't my place. I thought to myself, man, you're really not giving yourself a or not taking a great opportunity, right? And now I look
Yeah.
back on it and say, wow, she was really honoring what she truly wanted at the time. And that's harder
Hmm.
to do than just saying
Yeah.
yes to everything, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was very much the same. I remember I was working at the bank, and there was somebody I knew that moved from, Toronto to Atlantic, Canada for a senior leader position. And back of my mind, I was like, what a mistake,
Mhm.
right? Like your career trajectory is like completely going to be different from like Toronto to,
Like a huge
Atlantic, Canada.
metropolitan area to
Yeah, exactly.
when I think of
To like
Atlanta, Canada, I think of like Nova Scotia or I think of New
exactly.
Brunswick, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Exactly. Right. Which I mean, great, but in terms of like, that's where my head was at. And I remember talking to them, and you could just tell how happy they were in life.
Oh,
And I feel like, just like slowing down a little bit, like not to say that they're like exceptionally slow down there. It's just like it's not Toronto in terms of like the pace and all of this stuff. And it's so ironic because I did I went back to school and was in Halifax is where I did my master's, and now all I talk about is going to live there
that's
and
hilarious
getting it
because
out to work.
my husband and I are going there next week for 2 weeks.
You
So
are. That's right.
yeah,
That's right.
I'm very
Yes.
excited.
Yes.
I've always had this fantasy
I
about
love it
Nova
there.
Scotia. It sounds so romantic and very just relaxed, little fishing villages. I'm very excited.
Oh,
So
yeah, it's beautiful. I love Atlantic Canada, which is the most ironic part of this whole kind of story was like I was immediately being like, why would you do that? To now being, I'm so jealous. How can I do that?
but I think,
But I mean, yes.
when we were growing up, I remember my parents saying to me, oh, we're working so hard so you can have this better life. And I was
Right.
talking to my husband the other night, and I was like, so if we work really hard and have kids, who's enjoying this better life? It just keeps getting like passed down generation to generation. And I just
That's
like
such a good point. Yeah.
whether my husband and I have kids or not, I think the point of that is I want to be able to live my life now and be able to travel
Right.
now and be able to do all these things when I'm young, when I'm healthy. So many
Yeah.
people delay and wait, especially that follow like a very traditional sort of, I don't know, like get married, have kids, do the corporate thing. And then, things happen. Some people don't make it
Yep.
to retirement. Some people don't. have the ability to travel and do all that stuff afterwards. So, kind of putting a bow
Yeah.
on that, that was also part of my decision as well, is just
Yeah.
better flexibility in what I'm doing on a daily basis.
I love that too, because it all ties in, right? It's this idea of like, at the end of the day, the recommendation here, if you're in that 69 percenter, if you are a 69 percenter, it's not to like quit your job tomorrow. It's just take the opportunity to maybe, recognize how, you're showing up and whether there's anything that can be done to kind of help mitigate some of that stress, that anxiety that you're feeling that's within, the limits and restrictions that you have in your life based on commitments and all that stuff. But I think it is important to remember all of those things, like this delaying of, gratification, if you will, seems to almost be like a badge of honor that
Yes.
society puts on people, right? It's almost like if you delay, you get a reward. I am incredibly terrible at delaying gratification, as my wife would tell you. I'm ready to, like, right away. You know what I mean? Like those impulse aisles at the store, it's like they know I was coming. I'm just like, of course I need an eraser. But I think
That's
that's
75% off. Yes.
yeah, I'm like, of course. I don't write anymore, but I mean, just in case I need to. Batteries, you always need batteries. But I think that's the piece. It's almost like, you get rewarded so much for delaying gratification. It's like you almost feel bad about being impulsive. And I think that's a mistake because you never know what tomorrow is gonna bring, right? Life is so incredibly short. And I would much rather be going traveling, walking around Europe now than when I'm 70. And that's a real challenge for me to do. I hope I get to 70, but you never really know. So you got to take advantage of the time you got.
And I think going back to your comment around, yeah, the point is not to tell people to quit their jobs today, but it's one exercise that really helped me understand, to figure out, and I can send you the information after this if you want to link
That'd
it.
be great.
I worked with a business coach for a little while, and she had me do this. It was a pretty standard, like, Brene Brown activity. It's free online, and it was identifying your values. And she gave me this list of, God, it must have been like 200 different, like, research backed values that people can identify with, right? And the
Mhm.
activity for me was, first narrow it down to 15, then narrow it down to your top two values.
I think I've heard about this. Yes.
And that exercise was incredibly helpful, because then that is the lens I am looking through, that value lens. Like, I need to know myself first and what I want, what I value, before I can
Mhm.
pursue something that's going to bring that alive. And that very simple
Yep.
exercise was, I'm shocked that I still talk about it today, because this was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But I do
Mhm.
think about that, and I think about my top two values were freedom and peace. And anytime I look at an opportunity now, I'm like, are those two values going to be embodied? And a lot of times,
Mhm.
when you are in corporate change management that is transformational in nature, that is inherently impacting thousands of people, it is very stressful. It is very time sensitive. It is very concerned about budgets and cost realization and value. That's not peaceful, right? That's
Mhm.
not peaceful. That's really
Mhm.
stressful. And I felt it. I absolutely felt that in
Mhm.
my body. So my point is that that exercise can be really helpful for someone to take the time to get to know themselves. And I wish someone had, you know, educated me in that way when I was far younger.
Yeah, no, I really love that idea because it's like just a value of an organization, right? Like at the end of the day, when you're thinking about organizations approving different initiatives, they'll always go back to, or they should, does this align to the values and the goals and the principles of the organization? If yes, then it's something we can. It almost is like the first gate of approval,
Yeah.
and that should kind of be similar to us. It's like, but I don't think we do. And speaking about myself, I know I don't do this enough of like truly trying to understand like what are the values that are important to me and at this time because it changes constantly,
Absolutely. Like, you're
right?
like, what
You know,
stage of life are you in, right?
exactly,
Are
right?
you
You have kids.
accountable for more than yourself, right? Do you have children?
Yeah.
Do you have pets? Do you have, I don't know, aging parents? Do you
Mhm.
have yeah, and it changes. based on your life stage. And I think your experiences as well can very
Mhm.
much impact sort of that lens that you're looking through and what you want to prioritize in your life at that point
Right.
in time. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's doing it and being sure to do it more frequently. I mean, I'm a big fan of like doing these types of things like more frequently, even like the five love languages and stuff.
Oh,
Like, and I do it
absolutely. You know what?
every 2 years. I love it.
My husband and I took those quizzes when we first started dating, and it was hilarious because we're each sitting next to each other on the couch with our phones doing it, and then we swap phones and they look the same. I'm
Yes.
like, this is the easiest thing
No
ever
way.
because I'll just do what I would want for
Yeah,
you.
that's great. That's great.
Easiest thing
Yeah,
ever. So,
that is the best, right? Because I think that's the piece. Is like you always assume that you assume that the other person will want what you want, and
yeah,
in your case, it's easy,
it
right?
is. He
We and
does.
Becca are
Yeah.
pretty aligned too. So it's like, I just know I got to wash the dishes and cook dinner, and she'll be very happy, and I'm like, okay, I can do
What is that? Acts
that.
of service. Yeah,
Acts of
there you
service,
go. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. I love a good survey, so I'm gonna add this Brene
Who
Brown to the
doesn't?
list.
Yeah,
Who doesn't?
absolutely.
I was actually just reading. It was like it reminded me something. I was just reading this book, Radical Candor. I don't know if
I've
you've
heard it.
heard about
Yes.
this
I've
one. Yeah,
I've read it years ago when it first came out.
yeah.
Who's the
When I
author
first,
of that? Is it Kim
it
something?
is
Kim
yes, Kim Scott, maybe I think.
I think so.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was an interesting book, different take overall. But the
Yeah.
one part had nothing to do with the book that I'm referencing, or nothing to do with the actual like context of the book. It was just
Mhm.
some random aside that she said, and I thought it was really good. And I actually did this, which was she kind of stepped back and started to list out what are the things that like makes me like whole and complete like in my life. What are the things that I know I need to do? And I think she was talking about like, going to the gym, 3 times a week, or whatever it is. I'll just kind of say what mine are. It's like, going to the gym 3 times a week, being able to go out with like a family vacation like once a year,
Mhm.
going out to dinner as like a date with Becca once a week, seeing a friend or family once a week, for dinner or whatever. If I can do all of those things, it really makes me feel like, complete,
Yeah.
right? And so getting that list out and just kind of understanding like what is it that you need to kind of keep yourself going, even just that might just help you, because I find sometimes if you're in that
Absolutely.
rat race, you just forget about all the things that you need to show up,
Yeah. And even if you know what that is, they're not prioritized, right? And they're not
Yeah,
being
exactly.
prioritized because you're panicked and stressed about 85 million things at work, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the, COVID was terrible in many ways, but one of the benefits was, it allowed a lot of us to work remotely. But one of the,
Hmm.
I mean, I think this is quite obvious, but one of the negatives of that is you are reachable 24/7, right? I mean, you
Hmm.
are
Yeah.
truly accessible. And I found it incredibly challenging. I mean, I had boundaries set, but certain things were really important that needed immediate responses. And so there I am, 9 o'clock, trying to watch a movie at night with my husband, like responding to Microsoft Teams messages. And so I think there's personal accountability on the employee as well, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
To not respond and to hold those boundaries. And that can be really, really hard to do if you are identified as someone who's a high performer and who wants to get feedback that they're not a team player, right?
Yeah, exactly,
I
right?
mean,
Yeah, especially the work that we do.
and
It's like,
managers, yes, and as a man, like I've been a manager before. I will tell people you do not have to respond after this time, like very explicitly, and try to model
yeah.
that behavior because employees will not. I mean, they'll be like, well, you're doing it. And I've had bosses
Hmm.
say, but that doesn't mean you have to, but it kind of does. It kind of
Yeah.
does. Anyways, I just think this sort of uptick in digital work and remote work has been amazing. But at the same time, I think it has blurred those boundaries, requiring employees to really learn how to set those. And that's can be incredibly uncomfortable to do.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point, right? Because it talks about the conditions element of the work that might be what's causing, that stress or that feeling that you don't like your job, and that's such a difficult one because I feel like to your point, after COVID, it seems like every organization has done this, right?
Yeah.
But that could be your like non-negotiable. And, it's important to, identify that within yourself. But I think your point here, which is I think what I'd like to shift the conversation to a bit is, if you're a leader and you're listening to this, like what are some of the things that you need to be cognizant of as, as you're getting hit with this stat of like 69% of people don't like don't like their job and could leave if they could. Like that's important consideration for a leader to maybe think like maybe I need to adjust the way I'm approaching things because I want all of my people to, be around, to be retained, to stay within the team. But I think it's also important to realize that just because when we're talking about retention is very different from engagement, and engagement is not the same as, being aligned to the vision of your team and the organization. But I think a lot of leaders get just held up on the, retention or attrition rate. It's like they just care like nobody is leaving their team. And
it's expensive to hire people. It's disruptive. It's expensive. Yeah, I completely hear you. I think the number one piece of advice or guidance I would give a leader with a team is model the behavior that you want your team members to emulate. So if you are saying to them, I want you to have good work-life balance, which any manager should be saying. They should want that. They should want their team members to show up on a daily basis in a mentally healthy, mentally fit state, and to be whole human beings inside and outside of work, right? You need to model that as a leader. I have had so many managers previously that say to my face, oh, just set a boundary. Oh, just practice work-life balance, while they are triple multitasking on a call, taking calls at 10 o'clock at night because they have to. And that anxiety and that pressure, that does not stay insular to that person. It very much sets the precedent. And your word, if it does not match your actions, is your employees will not do what they need to do to take care of themselves, which then leads to things like burnout and lack of retention, right? I think managers are also really concerned about, everyone's like, oh, I want top performers, right? Well, not everybody is a top performer, and that's okay. And sometimes those folks that maybe are meeting expectations and getting the job done, they're doing that kind of because of what we previously discussed, because they're at capacity, right? And so I think seeing people for the level of effort they're willing to give and honoring that is also very important. That's not to say that if someone's not performing, a conversation isn't warranted. But again, not everybody needs to be excited about every opportunity, right? And not everybody needs to be a top performer. There's value in people who aren't top performers as well, because they're still showing up and still getting the work done. Like we need everybody in between.
Absolutely, right? Because you think about, and I didn't think I was going to be quoting Radical Candor as much as I has. That's just going to happen. But like they speak, or Kim talks about this idea of like superstars and rock stars on a team, both of them equally important for very different reasons, right? You've got, your rock stars who are going to stick with you. They're very happy with doing what they're doing, and they just don't want to change. They don't want to move up in the organization. They have no like desire to do that. And that's totally fine. But you need them just as much as you need the rocks or the superstars who are those who are like 1 foot out the door, just want to progress, because they're giving you everything that they got, but they're only there kind of temporary. And together you kind of build this team that is not only going to be effective in the short term, but the long term as well. So understanding like who those players are in that team is important. And I think a layer onto that, just to tie it to kind of what we're talking about, is the understanding that, there could be and most likely are members of your team that are not happy with the job. Either they've outgrown it or, or vice versa.
Oh, and people talk. People talk on a team, right?
And you kind of know, right? Like it's pretty obvious, usually. But you gotta be aware enough or have some team awareness of understanding kind of what your team is looking for. And I do think, and you correct me if I'm wrong or if you've seen anything different, but I do find that even when leaders find that this is a problem, they're always addressing like surface level type of like
Right.
problems
Well,
and solutions. They're not getting deep into like, it's like, oh, we're gonna, after the survey comes out and we find this problem, we'll create a task force to figure out like how do we make these
right.
small
The
changes, and then it goes nowhere. The
Can't tell you
task
how many
force. There's
task
always
force I've heard of. Yeah. Well, and I think,
always a task force.
I want to caveat, being a manager or being a leader, it's not easy, right? It's not
No,
easy
it's
at
like the
all
hardest thing in the world. Yeah.
because every single manager I have ever had wants to do, very genuinely wants to do what is best for their team. I have never had a manager who I'm like, wow, this person really doesn't care about me. I mean, I've really been
Yeah,
lucky
fair.
in that way. Um, but from a business perspective, that is not the priority of the business, right? A business's
Mhm.
priority is to generate revenue and grow and to um make shareholders happy if it's a publicly, and that's capitalism, right? There is incentive to grow and to innovate in this environment that we are in. And so
Mhm.
managers and leaders with the best of intentions for their teams may want to prioritize that, but the organization does not prioritize how do we make sure that people are the right fit for their role. They're more concerned with how do we just keep them if they're doing a really good job, right? And if they're
Mhm.
not happy, then get rid of them and we'll replace them. And I mean, that's kind of the harsh reality and there's choice, right? And that's a positive of
Mhm.
capitalism. There is an absolute choice in whether you want to stay in this role or not. Like, nobody's making you.
Mhm.
But I think, when we think about this from a more sort of, kind of widen the lens and think about from an American perspective, a lot of people stay in their jobs because of their health insurance, right? And
Mhm.
so I remember when I lived in Australia, there was this, and I regret to this day I did not stay to get my citizenship. But there was such empowerment of employees to be able to say,
Mhm.
this is not right for me. I am going to step away. And they still had health insurance, right? And I think that's why a lot of us in this system that we are in, your employer is subsidizing quite heavily at times fairly
Mhm.
decent health insurance, and then you go to the marketplace where it's over $1,000 a month for just terrible insurance. Of course people are going to stay at their jobs, and I think that's something that is really a shame. And I'm not trying to be political,
Mhm.
but I think it's a shame for the employees within this country because it does not give them the type of flexibility that, say, you might have in Canada or in the UK or in Australia, where you can take some time for yourself to really think about, what do I want to
Mhm.
do with my life? That's not a thing here unless you are married and able to get on like your spouse's insurance, and not everybody is. It's not a
Mhm.
right in this country to have health insurance.
Yeah, it's a really good point to set that context for that number as well. And I think at the end of the day, for leaders that are listening, it's like, first off, 100%, I agree. Like, leaders have like the toughest job, and I feel like nowadays it's just gotten worse and worse in terms of the expectations. Being in change
Mhm.
management, I think we have firsthand knowledge of when it comes to any change that's happening. It's like, oh, just send it to the leaders; they're gonna get their team mobilized for it. So
Yeah.
and that's on top of everything else that they've got to do. So by no means am I like, oh, leaders, you're dropping the ball. It's more of like you know there are ways that I think you can help yourself in terms
Yeah.
of making sure that you're being a bit more proactive and identifying these potential areas of resistance, and maybe turning them into a bit more of like opportunities, so that you can maybe proactively identify somebody who is not a good fit that you may want to help find somewhere else
Like a
to
lateral
go,
move, or,
so that
yeah,
you can
absolutely.
bring somebody else in, so that it's not a shock when they quit on you last minute. But also, the idea is like, if you do these small little investments, and I'm just thinking about maybe during one-on-ones, dedicating time to, or like dedicating like the first week of the month one-on-one to like checking in, talking about development opportunities, and that being a recurring theme, and seeing how that goes, that might just also get them a bit more engaged and help drive work forward for you, even in the short term as well. So it has that benefit on both sides. But it's so hard to find the time to do it. But I think if you try that, given this stat, it seems like it's like an urgent thing to worry about.
Yeah.
You know, just trying to get a line of sight of, or headway into this becoming a problem on your team.
Yeah, and I think from a psychotherapy perspective, one of the things I've learned beginning that education is that my job is not to make decisions for people. It's to help them
Mm,
critically think about life decisions that they are going to be making. And one of the prerequisites for something like that is safety, right? Psychological safety. Do I
mm,
feel safe with my manager, right, in a corporate
yeah.
setting, to tell them how I really feel and to get genuine advice back and know that that is going to be kept confidential, right? I mean, I think that is the other element, Andrew, of like if you are a
Hmm.
leader or a manager, if you can make your team members feel safe enough to be authentic with you, that's half the battle. I mean, they are going to share information with you. They are going to, you're going to know, them on a more personal
Hmm.
level. You're going to know what their aspirations are. And if that layer of fear is
Yeah.
dissolved and you're talking to them not only as a manager but really as a fellow human being and sharing your own experiences and being you don't have to be totally authentic, but be authentic, bring part
Yeah.
of your
Yeah.
authentic self to work. That helps build that rapport and that safety. So people are more likely to tell you, I don't like this or I don't want this opportunity. And being non-judgmental is incredibly helpful as well. Now,
Mm.
I feel bad for a lot of leaders and people managers because what I've noticed, and I'd love your not interviewing you, but I'd love your opinion on this.
Nobody ever asked me for my opinion. I love this
I don't
opportunity. I hope I have an
see
answer.
I don't see a lot of emphasis being put on teaching management skills. I think a lot of times there's a high performer that's really good at their job and they're like, let's give you some people to manage. And
Hmm. Hmm.
that's people go to school for that, there are management
Hmm.
degrees. And so I don't know. I mean, do you notice that as well, where there's like people are sort of hyper promoted, not really familiar with managing people, and suddenly they're accountable for the results of
Yep.
10 people, and it's just kind of a disaster because they haven't
Yep.
been taught those skills.
Honestly, it's such a great question, and it varies so much, industry to industry, company to company. And it incorporates such a multifaceted system in order for it to get right. I think we could probably do an entire episode on this topic, to be honest, around like the do's and don'ts. I'm not even
Oh,
lying,
yeah.
but it goes into like, at the end of the day, it's a two-way thing. Companies need leaders for sure to lead their people, and leaders want to be leaders because traditionally that means you're going to get a pay bump and you're going to have a higher salary as
Yeah.
a result of that. But think about what that results in terms of like behavior, and that's an encouraging. I mean, in terms of encouragement, you're encouraging people to just become leaders because they want more money. I've seen organizations in terms of how they create their job architecture,
Mhm.
or in a way where they kind of equally see value in individual contributors who are an expert in a particular field
Right.
to be at the exact same level as very senior executive leadership.
Right.
Um,
Like you're like a principal individual contributor, but you're
exactly.
sort of in line with like a senior director or an entry level
Or exactly.
VP. Yes. So you're getting
So if
compensated
you're
in
not a
that.
manager,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you're like not like a true leader,
Right.
or you don't have any interest in doing that, you don't have to force yourself into that route to,
Yeah.
you
It's a
know,
keep. It's a
be
keep. Yeah.
compensated
Mhm.
for what your value is, right? So
Yeah. It's a good
like,
point.
but you need that, right? First and foremost, in my opinion.
Right.
And
Right.
then for the leaders, there's how do you get them trained up to like understand not just like proper leadership, you know, under principles,
Hmm.
but how to like lead that's aligned to the organization, because some of that can be done internal, external to the company. Um,
Absolutely.
but you need to enable them, right? And so there is so much to unpack with that one, but it's a collective cultural change that I think needs to happen in order to make sure that leaders feel confident or feel like they're confident to have these conversations, but also to encourage people to become leaders only if they want to,
You're
not
right.
feeling like they have to. And I feel like in those organizations that don't do that, you get the problem where you have leaders that are leaders that should never be leaders. Say leaders one more time. And that's the unfortunate thing. But I do see a shift towards, in a lot of cases, not all cases. Again, very industry, even region specific, I think. I am starting to see this shift towards this understanding of how much pressure is on leaders and needing
Oh,
to enable them, but it's not where it needs to be still. There's
right.
so much that needs to happen to give them a fighting chance to deal with the day to day and all the other things that they got to do to kind of keep the teams happy and engaged while
Yeah.
also doing everything else that they need to do, sitting on like this committee, that committee,
That's just
working on
it, right?
18
There's
different
still
initiatives. How do they
it,
do it?
and just the administration of having director
Hmm.
reports and, quarterly performance reviews or, whatever that cycle is for that organization. But again,
Yeah.
I'm lucky because any leader that I've ever had I've been able to build that relationship where there's a certain level of authenticity. And I've been incredibly grateful for that because I've seen some
Hmm.
of my, friends that I've worked with have managers and I just think, ooh, I don't want to
Hmm.
work for that
Yeah.
person. Um, but at the same time, then you kind of step back and ask yourself, but is that leader who's not doing a very good job, are they just not supported? Right. And so
Yeah.
it's not just, oh, they're bad at their job or they're a mean person. It's like maybe they're not being supported in the way that they need to be successful. Right. And I think that
Right.
kind of viewpoint only comes from experience. Right. You don't
It's
think about
true.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, even me, like most people think like I'm a very calm kind of guy, but like when I'm stressed out,
Oh, I'm a
you know,
disaster when I'm stressed. A
I'm
disaster. Yeah.
I'm like almost don't want to be on calls with people because
I'm
when I'm
sure
in
Becca
front,
and
leaders are just
Steven could get together and be like, these two. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
yeah, because like when I get stressed, I get very short with people,
Oh, me
right?
too. It
And
comes out as like almost rudeness, I would say, my
yes, exactly.
anxiety.
Oh,
And
yeah,
it's
same.
that's your nervous system is at capacity,
Yeah.
right? It's like I can't take anymore. I can't deal with this. I need to not pay attention to this and go do what I need to do. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think a lot of people would be like, "Oh, I think Andrew would be like a good leader." But when I'm stressed, like I'm not that great of a leader, and I think leaders are just in a constant state of stress.
Yeah.
And so I think there's, not only work from an employee standpoint, which we talked about around, kind of being that taking that moment to reflect, on, how are you feeling and what do you need? What are your values? And really kind of asking those kind of tough questions if you are feeling like you're in that, kind of spot that you're not happy with your job. Are things that are in your control that you can maybe change? There's a part of the leader, of course, to your point, starting out with building that trust so employees
Hmm.
feel comfortable coming to you, right? But also on, creating that space for employees to be able to, give you that feedback. And then on the organizational side, I mean, we talked about like, looking at it from like holistically around like how do you enable leaders? Maybe you need to take a look at those, how are you encouraging leaders in the organization and do you need to relook at that in
Or
terms of
how are
leadership
you
development?
educating them? How are you train? I loved your point about like you've seen it organizations, people take that very seriously, right? Like how if someone's going
Yeah,
to be moving
exactly.
into management, then there's a prerequisite you need to go take this in-person training to learn how to be a manager, right? Um
Exactly. And
yeah,
coaching too, right? Which
absolutely.
I've talked about in previous podcasts as well, or episodes where it's like this element of like coaching where, it's like you talked about having, a business coach as well. Like
Mhm.
leaders should have a helpline, around like
They
if they
should
have an
call me.
issue.
They're a
Because
therapist.
yeah,
Yes,
they
exactly.
they should exactly. I think that's also important, which I'm also seeing a trend towards, in the change management space to like leverage or complement the change plan with,
Mhm.
in down in the field, sort of like coaching for leaders to help support them through. I feel like that's just being always on
Yeah,
sort of, you know, thing for leaders to know that I can go to this coach to help me. And I used to see that at the bank. The bank did have this, and it worked incredibly well, not only from a change management standpoint to like make sure that folks were enabled to change, but giving leaders that ability to just be like, I am so stressed right now. Just like tell me what I need to do,
absolutely.
you know,
And help them
and just having somebody
prioritize.
to talk
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
It's such a great model, and I know we've moved kind of away from it over the last like decade, but I am starting to hear more and more that that's starting to come up, and I'm hoping that it does, more so, because I think it could really help. So it's honestly everyone has a role to play in addressing that 69% stat. Um,
100%.
but I think we've probably talked for quite a while, so I feel like we're gonna maybe close things off.
Like
But I
wrap
did
it up.
that
Yeah.
wrap it up. Like we got things to do. Um, I did want to ask, because I always ask every guest, and I feel like it'll be very interesting given all of the change that's happened in your life recently. One book, podcast, or article that you've read, that you wanted to share with folks as maybe something they would be interested in.
I'll do a fun one first and then a more serious one. But I actually just started listening to Amy Poehler's podcast. It's called Good Hang. It's very
Okay.
fun and conversational, and it's very good for decompression. She just interviews some of her friends in the celebrity world, and it's just a chat. It's I find it very relaxing. And one thing that I have taken away from that podcast is everybody she talks to just has so much excitement and passion for what they do. And when I started listening to it last year, I kind of thought, I want that. Like, I want what those people have about what I do. I used to have it and I've kind of outgrown that. How can I get that back again? So that's just, that's a fun one. But it's very
I
enjoyable to
like it.
listen to, very relaxing, makes me laugh. And then the book that I find very inspirational, I'm sure lots of people have heard of it before, but it's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's about his experience in concentration camps during the Holocaust. And he kind of goes through this psychological sort of dialogue in his head. And he kind of looks at these individuals and says, how are these, how, like, who's going to make it through this horrendous experience and who is not? And he actually created some theories out of that. He's a psychiatrist. It's a very moving, well written, and interesting and thoughtful book about
Hmm.
resilience, behavior change. There's one quote I've used a lot from Viktor Frankl in like in my personal life, but also in like corporate facilitation. And I have it written down right over here. And it says, between stimulus and response lies a space. And in that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our happiness. And so this is really just inspiration for any type of behavior change, right? If you have the ability
Hmm.
to step back, think about things critically, and pause, really, that's the pause before you react, that gives you power in making certain types
Hmm.
of decisions. And so anytime I feel really stressed or rushed, I really try to remind myself I just need to pause. I need to really think about
Hmm.
this critically. And again, like I said before, change is any sort of behavior change is a choice between like what hurts and what hurts worse, right? And I do find in corporate and in my personal life that people have to be pretty uncomfortable to take a step outside of their comfort zone and to try something different. And that in
Yeah.
itself is really terrifying to do. It can be really
Hmm.
terrifying as well to look inward and to ask questions that maybe other people seem to have the answers to and you've never asked yourself before, or just feel really uncomfortable. Because, I think getting to know yourself is so important, but it's not really talked about that much, but it's
Mhm.
really that's the most important relationship any of us will ever have in our lives is the relationship we have with ourselves because there's so much
Mhm.
power and control over our actions with that. So wrapping it all up, that quote is something I anchor to and has become really important to me. And the book is it's fabulous. It's full of
Mhm.
wisdom and insight.
It's so funny that you recommended that book because when I quit my job, that was the book that my therapist recommended I read. And I agree with everything you said about it. It was incredible. Just to kind of, I don't know, what would be the term, Josh? I'll kind of like anchor my experience almost, because like he's talking about, how he got through the Holocaust, and obviously I'm dealing with something completely like not even close to
Right.
that. But the bedrock of it or the foundation of it was, this search for meaning and the power of purpose in
Yeah.
getting him through, right? It was just such a fascinating book and such a great read. So it's funny you recommend it on your journey to being a therapist. You
Very.
recommended the book that my therapist
There you
recommended
go.
when they're in this pivotal. You're in like the perfect space for you, I think,
Well,
honestly.
thank you. I'm really excited, and I don't know what I'm going to specialize in yet. But a passion area of mine definitely is working with folks in corporate around things like burnout, work-life balance. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, this has been fun. It's been fun catching up
Yeah.
too. I
It
miss
has
you.
been, honestly. I miss you too, honestly. I definitely, it was always so fun working together. We always had such a
Absolutely.
great time.
Yeah.
And I honestly really appreciate, you taking the time to be here, to tell your story, the challenges, and the opportunities that, kind of lie ahead now. I'm just so proud of you, honestly, and
Oh, thank
and
you. I'm proud of me
the journey
too.
that you're on.
So it's
You
really
should be proud of
scary. It's
yourself.
really scary.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
you're gonna be doing incredible work.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah. Well, we'll see. But that's the
I'm sure.
goal.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I love it. I see it as like change management is like almost like, there's different like kind of like a doctor, where it's like you could specialize in like
oh yeah.
pediatrics or geriatrics. And like change management is like you can go the corporate route or you can go like the business coach route or you can go the therapy
Absolutely.
route, And I mean, there's so many jobs even outside of those that like deal with change, like personal trainers even like,
Oh,
it just
seriously.
that's
Seriously.
right. It's
Anything.
everywhere.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is. That's what I And that's what I say. I remember, like, when I've coached or mentored like young people coming into this field, maybe they're, kind of a traditional business analyst and they've been staffed with me to do, a change management project.
Hmm.
A lot of them are really skeptical about it. They're like, oh, this is really fluffy. This is communications. And I'm like, no, this is knowledge. Like, whether or not you choose to pursue this as a career, this
Yeah.
information is applicable to you for the rest of your life. So, even if you want to be here
100%.
temporarily, soak it in, learn it,
Yeah.
and be steps ahead of all the people around you because
I agree with you.
yeah, the
Yeah.
models that we use, the neuroscience that we use is directly applicable to individuals. And yeah, it's a great career to have. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Maybe I'll end up back in it someday. Who knows? So
Well, I hope not. I think you found the right I think you found the right path. I feel like you're honestly I could see you being so there was somebody else I know that kind of went down a path like this and as soon as she said she was going into like becoming a therapist, I was like that's perfect. Like I feel like that's where I feel like she'll do the best work. And I kind of had a similar reaction to you. I was like, I feel like the one-on-one to help people through change, I think you're perfect for.
well, and
So
Andrew,
I'm looking forward.
who doesn't love to yap, right?
Who
Chit
doesn't?
chat.
I mean, honestly, I mean, this is a 2.5 hour podcast, so thank you, wife, for listening this far.
Yeah, there you
But
go.
on a serious note, though, for anyone who is listening who may feel like, they're maybe part of that 69%, maybe the question is not, as we were saying, should I quit my job tomorrow? Maybe the better question is, what is this really feeling trying to tell me? Is it the work? Is it the conditions around the work? Is it the organization? Or is it just that you've maybe changed, just as we all do, and your role just no longer fits who you are at that stage in your life? You don't necessarily have to blow up your life like we did overnight, but you do have to be honest with yourself about where this friction is coming from. And that's where the reroute starts. Shameless plug
Awesome.
there. My name is Andrew Ourique, and this has been another episode of Reroute Reflections. Thank you, Anna, again for being part of this episode. It's been great chatting. And for everyone else, we'll catch you back here next month. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.